For the longest time, I allowed others, loving and well-intended others, to write that story for me. As a first-generation immigrant, my parents valued job security above most things. And so I did quite well in school, and I landed a teaching job just like every other woman in my family. But after doing a little bit of math 10 years ago, I realized that I still had 966 weeks before I could retire. 966 weeks before I could live the life of my dreams. At this time, I had only done what everybody else wanted me to do and to achieve. And 10 years ago, I had just turned 30 years old, I had just had a baby, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. As I saw my daughter, I realized that she was going to do as I did, not as I said. So I opened my life book, and I turned it to a blank new page so I could start my new story. But it stared at me, blank, empty. I didn't know where to begin. So what I did was I just faced the writer's block. And I said, what do you do when you have writer's block? And I said, you can brainstorm. So I decided to brainstorm using a mind mapping technique. And I decided to do that. But as I was doing that, I realized that I was going back to all the stories that other people had told about me. I realized that I was going back to all the things that people had written that were not necessarily me. So today, I'm going to share with you how I was able to write my first story, or the first chapter of my story, that has led to living the life of my dreams, a life full of freedom, wealth, and lots of joy. And the first step is tear out the pages that others have written about you. Why do I say this? Because even though they were well-intentioned and they wrote good things about me, they don't really say exactly who I am. And so when last month I asked people to crowdsource, I crowdsourced what they thought about me, they said beautiful words like this. And some of these words I will use to describe myself now, they don't really say who I am. The story that my parents wrote for me to become a good student and a person with job security went something like, good girl, that's a stalled, A student. And while those things describe me, they didn't tell the story of who I was. So, step number one, tear out those pages and start mind mapping, which is step number 2. And I started my mind map with a central idea. I wrote Saray at the center, my name. And I drew different lines that radiated from that center. The first one over here was 1983, the year that I was born. And that's when my story begins. And it begins in the South, more southern than here. As if you can tell from my accent, it is not from the southern US, but from Mexico. From a tiny, skinny state that borders most of the Gulf of Mexico. In a tiny, dusty, dirty oil refinery town that didn't have many choices for occupation when you grew up. On my dad's side, you became a day laborer, maybe cleaning houses, cleaning, cooking. On my mom's side, if you were a girl, you became a school teacher. If you were a boy, you became an engineer. And that's how it was. So I said, okay, I cannot focus on what other people have written about me, what they expect of me. I need to focus on what brings me joy. So I wrote Gulf of Mexico. And I closed my eyes and I saw the ocean. I felt the waves, the wind, the sand. And I wrote now, ocean equals happy place. And as soon as I wrote happy place, I was transported into another happy place of my childhood, my grandfather's garden. every morning in the summer when we go to visit him, the smell of petrichor, which is the smell of dirt after rain, will wake me up. And I will rush to go and experience his garden. And as I remember the word petrichor, and I closed my eyes, I was taken immediately back to the moment when I saw a hibiscus the size of my face, and I closed up on it and saw the velvety ridges of it that felt so wonderful against my fingers. And so I wrote petals, and I circled that. And as I was circling it, the word petals reminded me of the exoskeletons I collected as a child, because I was a little weird. I liked the exoskeletons of cicadas, and sometimes also the ones from bees or, scarabs that I saw laying on the ground when I was coming back home from school. So I had a big collection of those things. And when I wrote the word home, I circled it again. And as I circled it this time, it was a very perfect circle. And it reminded me exactly of the time that I had taken some scissors and I had cut perfect little circles out of my mom's new curtains and tablecloth so I could create some new outfits for my Barbies. I could still feel the motion in my hands. I could still hear the sound of the scissors cutting through thick fabric. So much joy, until my mom realized the fabric looked too familiar. And so I was like, you know what, you're in a good place. Yes, that's exactly what I want you to do. Think of all those things that you love. So I started with the next one, 1993. And I said, okay, Saray, you have a good start, let's keep going. 1993, I had moved a lot already, almost every year with my parents, and my collection of insect exoskeletons and Barbie dresses was gone. They were just memories that I was replacing now with facts, numbers, dates, things that I will need to make an A on my next test. And I said, okay, Saray, you know what, just slow down. Go back to that happy place. Think. No, don't think. Feel. What do you see? And I saw a white crane with one leg up and one leg on shallow water. Then I saw my cat Naoko. He was coming toward me, kind of like I was his prey, but he was frozen in motion. And I realized that my happiest memory of that decade was my first camera. So I knew that my new story was going to really have to do with something related to photography. You know what? I'm on a roll. Let's just get through all my decades now, 2003. And right before I started, I hear a little noise. And I opened my eyes and I realized that my baby is now awake and she's ready for her next feeding. So I go back to adulting mode. I take care of her, and I lose my train of thought. And I realize that it's going to take more effort to actually power through my next decades of brainstorming. I get a little bit upset, a little bit restless. I don't understand, why now that I know that I can create the life of my dreams, I cannot just go for it. So that's when the universe gives me the next step, which is take time to rest. And so I took time to rest, actually several months of it, until one beautiful sunny Saturday morning. My husband Daniel took Sophia for the day to see his mom or something, and I was able to sleep in and wake up rested. And so I woke up and I said, you know what? This is a good day to brainstorm again. So I did. I brainstormed through 2003, and I was like, what about this, Saray, this decade, made you the most joyful? And it was an easy answer. I thought of the liberal arts studies that I had at Maryville College. Before coming to the US in 2004, I had already taken 3 years of college where it was very specific. Every single student took the same classes in the same order every single semester. So when I came here and they told me this is a liberal arts college, it was kind of crazy because I didn't understand what that meant. I was like, so you're telling me I can take any course I want and every course I choose does not have to be related to anything else I take? Kind of like trying all the soda flavors before choosing the one I want to purchase, right? And it just blew my mind. I didn't know that was something I could do. So I did that. I took every course there was, photography, embryology, social studies, it didn't matter, music, art. It was fun. And I realized that what I loved the most about this decade was the fact that I enjoy the freedom of choice. And when I boldened the word freedom and the word choice, the next word came to me, which was Japan, where I spent 6 months as an exchange student. As I thought of that, the word wonder with an O and wonder with an A came to mind. In my Southern English, they both sound the same, so I have to make the difference, O and A. So I did, and as I thought about that, all the pictures from my trips came back to mind. And the one thing that came popping up kind of like in bold was the word textures. So I wrote it down on my piece of paper. And as I stared at it, I took up the same pen and I circled it over and over and over and over and over and over again until it almost came off the paper. And as I touched the dent that I had made, it started bleeding off into the white paper, and my next vision came to me. It was the 1999 catwalk of Alexander McQueen, where there was a model wearing a white, crisp dress, and she was just twirling around as a robot painted the whole dress. It was amazing. And I said, you know what? This is it. This is what I want to do. And a voice, I heard said, are you sure, Saray? I mean, yeah, it's Alexander McQueen. But, people call him crazy, eccentric, a little weird. Is that what you wanted people to say about you? And before I could agree with that voice or disagree with it, I said, you know what? I know what I need to do, and that's step number 4. Once the vision has come to you and you realize where you are the most joyful, you just have to go for it, whether it's a little weird or not. So 2013 was here. That's almost 10 years ago. I was 30. I was in full adulting mode with a husband, a mortgage, a baby, and it was time for me to start creating my new story. I knew photography was going to be a big part of it. I knew that photographing this much of a person brought me the most joy because I got to know who they were. And by knowing who they were, I was inspired to also be myself. So 2013, I started working on getting to know my camera. This time was a DSLR as opposed to a film camera that I had used before when I was growing up or when I was in college. And as I did that, a new mentor came to me, and she taught me how to take beautiful pictures of anyone that decided to sit for me, but also how to run a successful business. She was really a person who gave me permission to do what I wanted to do with my life, and I'm so thankful for her. So I started my business. I didn't have all my ducks in a row like maybe I should have, but I knew that if I didn't do it now and I learned as I went, it probably wouldn't happen. So on January of 2015, I opened for business officially. And my plan was that in 5 years, I was going to stop teaching and have a full-time job now doing photography. Little did I know that now that I had aligned what I loved the most, what brought me the most joy with my education and my occupation, I could turn 5 years into 5 months. And by June 1st of 2015, I was able to quit my teaching job. It was exhausting. It was very scary. I told you before that I had to rip out the pages and burn them. And I had to also burn a few bridges with my family who didn't see where I was headed. It was temporary though. We're back in good terms now. I just had to distance myself from the old narrative for a while so that I could continue walking my true path. In 2015, I opened for business. June, I quit my job. And so what happens next? I start working, and I start doing work for clients that I meet, and they love it. It's great. It's going good. By the second year, I had doubled my teacher salary. By the third year, I had 10x'd it, and still something was missing. I had spent all of this time finding who I was, and even though I had a beautiful mind map with all the things that brought me joy, when I rewrote my story as a business, I realized that some things were not doing exactly what I wanted. So what happened? What I did was, I said, you need to go back to joy. Because when you go back to joy, you bring those pictures of the hibiscus and the exoskeletons with fabrics in your work. And that thing really brings you joy, but also brings you lots of awards and more wealth. And I'm here to tell you that that's step number 5. Follow the joy. Look for it in everything you do. You cannot go wrong that way. And as I write now a new chapter in my story, a chapter where I end and I can show you all the things that I have accomplished, and I'm basically closing it and starting anew. I know that I don't have to rip out the pages anymore, but I can start with a new blank page to write a second chapter. I know I can mind map to bring all those stories together, take all the rest I need whenever I need it, go for it when the vision becomes clear, and choose joy every time. Thank you.